Missing children is an epidemic. In the United States alone, roughly 800,000 kids go missing each year. Many never heard from again. And nobody asks why this is happening or where they are going. The news media only reports a tiny fraction of them. Beneath haunting headlines and troubling statistics lies a dark underworld of organized kidnapping, child trafficking, and satanic cults.
People think or relate the number of children that go missing every year to the number of times we see a story on the news that a child is missing and everyone's trying to find them. That is the tiniest tip of the iceberg.
What is happening to these children? Join me as we search for the truth behind the disturbing numbers of missing children. How many children really go missing each year in America? More than the news would have you think. Reliable statistics regarding missing children are hard to come by, perhaps deliberately so. But we know officially hundreds of thousands of children go missing every year, many never heard from again.
And it is rampant. I keep using that word, but it is. People don't realize what happens is people think or relate the number of children that go missing every year to the number of times we see a story on the news that a child is missing and everyone's trying to find them. That is the tiniest tip of the iceberg. Hundreds of thousands of children go missing in America every year. I've rung the states, because they don't have federal figures, tell you how many cars went missing federally, but not children. They said, you've got to ring the states. I rung a load of states years ago now. I said, how many children go missing every year? How many children went missing last year? And I added the figures up. What? Never seen this on the news, hundreds of thousands. Some of them are found, some of them have explanations. Not all, nothing like.
And you know, there's 100,000 children go missing a year under 16. 100,000.
100,000 you would think would make the news all the time.
You would think so, and I guess that's the problem. Just too many.
Police often write off missing children as runaways, when the exact nature of their disappearance is unclear. Even if the parents suspect otherwise, many do not have the resources to hire private investigators to locate their children. Take, for example, the case of insane clown killer John Wayne Gacy, who entertained at hospitals, orphanages, and private birthday parties. He sexually assaulted, tortured, and murdered at least 33 teenage boys and young men between 1972 and 1978, while police classified the growing numbers of missing boys as runaways.
Police were assigned to keep Gacy under 24-hour surveillance. Investigators were stunned to discover that many of the recovered items belonged to Gacy's former employees who were missing, and other young men thought to be runaways.
When most people think of kidnapping, they assume it's just some lone pervert. However, there are well-organized kidnapping rings across the country, supplying children into the underworld. They stake out locations, and sometimes even specific children in advance.
So when you see missing children on milk cartons, and you see that you go in Walmart and see that wall missing and such, they're not missing, they've been kidnapped. They have a crew that goes in certain parts of town, and they ask for the ages. We want them between 6 and 10. And they'll say we want them all white. And that's what they'll get. We want 3. And we want them in those age brackets.
Chauncey Glover, who just spoke with that young victim. Chauncey?
The incident happened right here along Star Peak Drive. The little boy lives right down the road. He's 11 years old and is a 6th grader here at Hill Intermediate School. He was walking here to this school Friday morning around 8 o'clock when that white work van pulled up next to him. Now, I want to show you these pictures of the van. This is the van police are searching for right now. Now, the boy says 3 Hispanic men were inside of the van and tried to lure him in. He says they had some type of dog catching net, that they were trying to put over him.
How do they find the girls that they think they want? Now, back in the day, it was hard. They had to go to the school grounds and go to these gymnasium of baseball and football games and watch the cheerleaders. That's how they did it back in the day. They sent out scouts. It's like a scout, but the guy was a perv to decide who he was going to kidnap. And they would take pictures and without their knowledge. Well, they don't have to do that no more. That was the 70s and 80s. They just go on the internet. They go through Instagram. They go, well, the best one is thus far is Instagram and Facebook. They locate her IP address, Google map it, they know where she's at. And what they'll do is send someone out there, her location, and just watch to see when she come out, and they'll get her routine down packed. They'll see she goes here, she goes there. We'll get her getting off the bus. Or do it Friday. Or they'll just pick a day. But they do their scouting on the internet.
But our private detectives have been digging up a lot of information showing an overall network in the country, and that Johnny was a possible victim of that network as opposed to just a random pedophile running around Des Moines. So when I presented what we had in our case, the person that followed me in presenting was a member of the FBI, and what they had laid on the table about this size was nothing but one publication after another that had all been taken from a pedophile in a raid that the FBI conducted. And then the other interesting thing that was there on the table was a book of pictures of kids who had not yet been kidnapped.
The statement was that you could order a kid out of that book.
And the interesting thing is that from time to time when we do hear of reports of children being photographed either on a playground and or walking to and from school or just whatever, in many cases there is an abduction attempt on the same child up to 3 weeks, a month, or 2 months later.
One of the most famous kidnapping cases in America is that of Iowa paperboy Johnny Gosch, the first missing child to appear on a milk carton. At 12 years old, he was the victim of what they would later realize to be a professional kidnapping ring.
He was also involved in kidnapping.
Oh, yeah.
What knowledge do you have of that?
They'd have what they call catalog kids.
Mm-hmm.
They would basically just go out driving around looking for kids.
Uh-huh.
And they would take pictures of them and go to these wealthy, influential people and say, you know, would you be interested in this one or that one or the next one?
Mm-hmm.
And they would basically go snatch them.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what happened to Johnny Gosch.
Despite obvious evidence to the contrary, police insisted on listing Johnny as another runaway.
The cop looked at me. He said, well, has your son ever run away before? And I said, didn't you just hear me? I said, my son did not run away. Someone has taken him. I just gave you the information from all of the witnesses. The cop said, well, I'll check on this. Even after all the witnesses, after all of this information that had been given, the police chief put Johnny into the NCIC computer as a runaway.
My gosh.
It took me 4 solid months to get his classification changed in the computer.
Some of these missing children are sold into the international slave trade. For centuries, the so-called elite and ultra-powerful have preyed on the most vulnerable and precious of society. Now, more than ever, there is a global demand for children. There are auctions where such victims are sold as sex slaves to international bankers, politicians, and the very wealthy.
They give any indication of how much it costs to buy one? Because what I'm saying is that this is not going to be done cheaply, and it's not going to be done cheaply.
We've heard estimates of about $50,000 to $75,000 per child, depending on the features and the looks of that child, the innocence, prepubescent children. There are also, and this has been documented by a number of private investigators who've researched it, that periodically auctions take place in the United States. Different places, they move around. They don't just set up shop in one spot and publish a notice that there's going to be an auction. It's done very secretively, and they might run 10 to 20 kids at a time through an auction block. And the buyers can be from foreign countries or whatever. And then the child would never have a hope of ever getting back to his own country.
Former head of the LA FBI, Ted Gunderson, spoke about one such auction location outside of Las Vegas, where Illuminati bankers and Middle Eastern royalty come to buy American children.
What do they do with these kids that they kidnap? Paul Benassi has attended 6 auctions where they auction children. Any age from 3 and 4 all the way up to 21. They put a tag around their neck. They're in their underwear. They have a number on the tag. And people down below bid on them. The kids sell for between $15,000 to $50,000. I've even heard of one kid going for $100,000. One of the locations outside of Las Vegas, about 50 miles outside of Las Vegas, and I located it. It's airstrip. I went up with a friend of mine and we found it. And there were airplanes there. There were campers there. And there were men who, with foreign accents. There was a police officer there, at least somebody in a uniform. These kids are auctioned off and put on the airplane, and nobody knows what's happened to them.
These trafficking rings use various control methods to keep victims enslaved. Johnny Gosch's mother, Noreen Gosch, claims the group that kidnapped her son actually branded their victims.
And one of the other things that they did to all of the victims of this particular ring, I'll call it, was brand the children.
That's right, yeah.
They used a branding iron, and they would heat it up, and the kids were branded. Someplace on their body.
Yeah.
A leg, a shoulder, a hip, it didn't matter. It would just be someplace on all of them. And the kids were told that because of that brand, no matter if they tried to change their other physical features or appearance, these people would always be able to find them.
But child trafficking rings are only the tip of the iceberg. There are even darker forces at work behind child disappearances. No doubt some children end up the victims of satanic cults. Since ancient times, children have been the preferred sacrifice of strange gods and demonic deities. The Bible warned Ammonites against making their children pass through the fires to Molech. These same arcane practices are still practiced today. According to Satanist Aleister Crowley, a male child of perfect innocence and high intellect is the most satisfactory and suitable victim for sacrifice.
12-year-old girls are fake, more or less. They've been known to get down to 10, but they usually start at 12 or 13 and go to 25. And for the people who like to hitchhike, this is how they pick them all up. And of course, the police will just tell the parents the kids run away from school. They use them for sexual and for sacrifice, human sacrifice. The LA County Sheriff's Department has a very secret undercover thing. I don't even know if you can find out if it exists, but I've talked to them. It's called the Occult Squad. They told me in '73 that they found 35 bodies of girls in Los Angeles County that year that they knew to be human sacrifice, which they listed as rape cases to keep from the public. The statistics that came in so far this year are close to 125. The year's not even over. Now that's girls that have been used for human sacrifice. And if you'll notice, there's quite a few rape cases that happened around Halloween that are in the news right now. And from what we can find out, the circumstances that each death fits human sacrifice. But you'll never hear it, that's the reason.
The body of the missing 5-year-old girl was recovered yesterday.
So the kid was killed?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Oh. The child was first reported missing from her home by her mother last Tuesday morning. On Friday, Maria Andrette McNeil was charged with first-degree kidnapping, and late Saturday, her mother, Antoinette Nicole Davis, was arrested on accusations that she prostituted her daughter.
I think a lot of these kids who are brought up by these Satanists who sacrifice these children in religious rituals.
In June 2017, Dutch banker Ronald Bernard garnered worldwide attention when he did an interview blowing the whistle on the dark and secretive world in which he was involved. In it, a clearly troubled Bernard explained how at the top levels, the world financiers are satanic and engaged in bizarre rituals, including sacrifice of children.
It was the good life. But then at some point, I was invited, which is why I'm telling you all this, to participate in sacrifices abroad. That was the breaking point. Children.
If you know someone who is missing, report it immediately. You don't have to wait 24 hours. This is the type of important information that is under attack right now, so please do your part by sharing this video before it's too late. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button. Make sure you're...
We're going to be talking about here. And let me see what's going on here. And your name of your show is A Hidden Truth?
Yeah.
And you're a civil rights lawyer, right?
Correct.
And so I'm sorry, your name is not, your name is not Michael, I'm sorry. I'm really bad.
Jim Breslow.
Jim Breslow, okay, thanks Jim. So anyway, everyone, we're here with Jim Breslow. I'm doing an interview with Jim for his station, Hidden Truth. And we're going to really talk about science, the coronavirus, but more importantly, what I believe the fraud of the mainstream media. And I think it'll be very valuable for people to really understand what's going on in this country and frankly, the lack of appreciation for skill and science and math and engineering and physics and people who are adept at something. And I think that would be very valuable, Jim. So at the outset, I think it'd be good for people to really understand what my background is. I'm pretty humble about talking about it, but everyone says you should emphasize in each show that I do. So just to give you the background, you know, my PhD is in a field called systems biology out of the MIT Department of Biological Engineering. Now that department did not come into being until 2003. I was one of the first graduates out of that department, and we should talk about why that came. After I graduated, I did a very new thesis of solving a problem which even at MIT people did not think was solvable, which was creating a technology platform to model the entire human cell. Completely a new methodology because it's a revolutionary technology, and that technology is called CytoSolve. That was my PhD work. Just to give you an understanding, 50% of the people who take their MIT PhD exams fail. They don't get their PhD. You can count the number of people in the world who get their PhD at MIT. In fact, getting into an undergraduate degree at MIT is quite a big thing, which I was very humble and I didn't really talk about. You know, out of the hundreds of thousands of people who apply, about 1,000 get in. I was one of the 1,040 students who came in 81. And in fact, I was a 3 out of the 1,040 who was featured on the front page of MIT when I walked in for inventing the first email system in the world. You know, before I came to MIT. After my undergraduate degree, I went and worked at a company where I created one of the first, was one of the senior engineers at a company that created one of the first presentation graphic system, or predecessor to PowerPoint. That got sold to what was now known as IBM. Then I came back and I did my master's at the MIT Media Lab in the early ways to do scientific visualization of very complex data. And then that was my master's, and I also ended up getting another master's in applied and theoretical mechanics on really understand wave propagation in materials. And everyone wants me to do a thing on 5G, and I'm putting that together, but I understand wave theory. And then I went and started another company to analyze email after winning a competition for the White House. And I built that company at around $250 million in value, and that was a company to analyze email for the biggest Fortune 1000 companies in the world. We built a technology, what you would call AI, we call pattern analysis. Then after that, I came back to MIT in 2003 to pursue my PhD in this field called systems biology. And after that, I ended up winning one of the prestigious Fulbright scholarships, took 2 years off to India to study the integration of Eastern and Western medicine. And that was featured on the front page of MIT because people found it interesting. A guy with 4 degrees wants to go back and study traditional systems of medicine. I was also nominated for the National Medal of Technology and Innovation, which the United States President gives away. And most recently, I was invited to present the prestige lecture at the National Science Foundation. And you can go and look at my resume. A guy like me typically would sit around academia in a very lofty position and be stayed, but that's not who I am. The position I took was very different. I built my own research institution. I went and did my own innovations. I made, tens of millions of dollars by inventing. So this gives me a significant distance from owing anything to anyone. So I think those credentials are important to understand. I've written many books. I get invited all over the world. I'm recognized as one of the leading people in the field of precision and personalized medicine, and one of the leaders on the immune system. Medical doctors, to everyone listening, I would say a fraction of them, maybe 1% of them, understand the immune system. They're not qualified. The immune system is a very complex system, and that's why the field of systems biology came. In 2003, when the Human Genome Project ended, people recognized something very, very important. They recognized that we didn't have a systems level view of the body. Everything up until 2003 is focused on genes, genes, genes. People were trying to, gene hunters. Oh, let me find the gene for causing this disease. Let me find the gene for causing this disease, so on. So in 1993, the United States government, with many, many other countries, decided to do what was known as the Human Genome Project. And the Human Genome Project was to take the entire human genome and map it out. Find out every gene in there. Oh, this gene is for the nose. This gene is for the ears. You see what I'm saying? Map out. We had done it for a worm by 1993, and we knew how a worm had around 20,000 genes. So now it was, wow, let's go after the entire human genome. And you have to understand, when the Human Genome Project started, people thought that the human genome had about, a million genes. All right? Because the reason they thought a human genome was they said, wow, look at how much more complex than we are as a lowly worm. Well, when the Human Genome Project actually ended in 2003 it turns out we only have 20,000 genes, okay? So this literally flipped biology on its head, Jim, in a significant way, because people said, whoa, we have the same number of genes as a worm. How can this be, right? We should clearly have more genes. And so fundamentally what people realized was, wait a minute, it's not the number of parts that make the difference. You see, biologists are focused on the parts. They understand little parts. You win a Nobel Prize just for understanding a protein A interacts with protein B. You can win a Nobel Prize for that. But you're not incentivized to understand the whole complexity of the whole physiome. So that led into a field called systems biology, where people said, you know what, we have it all wrong. It was a revolution in biology took place in 2003, and that revolution was, we need to start connecting all the dots to create a whole framework of the human body. As a part of that, in 2003, the National Science Foundation said, could we create a way to mathematically understand all the molecular reactions in the human body? So think about that. If we could mathematically model the chemical reactions in the human body, you know what we could do? We could actually understand disease on the computer. How do we build an airplane today? We don't throw a test pilot in and say, fly this, here's my new wing, kill him. No, everything's done on the computer. We test all different wing designs. And then we say, wow, that looks like it's working, because we understand Bernoulli's law, we understand physics. And then we go to a wind tunnel, we build a little model, and then we don't kill too many pilots anymore. But the way pharmaceutical companies do medical research, they simply shoot in the air. They say, I think this is doing something in a test tube. Let me go kill hundreds of animals. Then they get allowance by the FDA after 6 years of doing that, and they go phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 tests. Typically go to some poor people and they pay the money to do tests on them. All right? That's a pharmaceutical development model. It takes around 13 years. So the reason this was important, if it could use a computer to model complex chemical pathways, we could predictively understand, you know what, that vaccine, that drug, this thing could cause toxicities, and we could alleviate a lot of human suffering. In fact, we could understand how combinations of natural products work, which is what my interest was, because I grew up in India and I saw this profound set of events where my grandmother would look at your face, predict what was going on in your body, and she would mix proper things to do that. And that was called a different system of medicine known as Siddha, okay? So that was my interest. And here, MIT created this beautiful department called biological engineering, which was saying, just as chemical engineering was the equivalent of chemistry, we needed biological engineering to understand biology, to understand how we could engineer biological systems. So I was one of the first graduates. It's a very new field. So what people need to understand is, frankly, I know more than Fauci on this. I know more than probably 99% of the MDs on this, because it's a field that of systems. So I study systems. I've published in peer-reviewed journals like Nature Neuroscience, which a handful of scientists in the world would die to publish in. Published in Cell. So you're looking at an accomplished scientist, and the problem to many of these people, very dumb people in mainstream media, little children, they can't comprehend. A guy like me can articulate, is reasonably good looking, can talk, has all my degrees. That blows their mind. It doesn't compute for them, because you're typically supposed to be a nerd who can't talk. You're typically supposed to be someone who does not fight for other people. So they find it hard to handle a triple threat like me. So you see denigration in the media, people trying to deny that I created the first email system. Idiots like at the New York Times, 2-year-olds. People trying to denigrate me, trying to call me an anti-vaxxer. When in fact, the first paper I put out was Beyond Vax, Anti-Vax, that we need to take a personalized systems approach. So these people have a major problem with me, because you're looking at someone who's a serious scientist and has played with the best in the world, including Nobel Prize people. So I find it a very interesting opportunity now to be here at this moment in history, where I think we're at an inflection point. We're at a point where there's massive corruption in the media, there's massive corruption in science, there's massive corruption in all the major institutions. And so I think the mainstream media are some of the most ignorant people on the planet. And many of these people wouldn't even be qualified to be a student in an undergraduate class that I would teach. So everyone listening out there, I'm going to start a series, maybe we'll talk about it. We're going to start taking these journalists, and we're going to start taking these journalists down. We're going to look at their resumes, what their backgrounds were, the nonsense that they're writing, and rip it apart from a scientific basis, and really show the connection of many of these journalists to the organizations they belong to, and how those organizations directly tie into power, profit, and control. Now, others, like one of my mentors, Noam Chomsky, has done this in Manufacturing Consent. Robert McChesney has done this. This is not a old topic. It's always been done in academic circles. We're going to take it mainstream. We're going to go after these fake journalists, after the fake scientists, after the fake historians, in a very direct and vicious manner, because these people are actually not doing journalism. They're basically doing propaganda. So I think we can talk about that in this context. Why? How dare anyone attack someone of my credentials, who's busted his ass, who came from working class background, who's earned everything that I have. And it's time that we go after these people, because what's really exciting is that the alternative media, I think our followers are growing exponentially, not even exponentially, is because the alternative media is putting to shame these so-called journalists.
Well, it doesn't seem to come from the top that everybody's following Fauci. It seems that the medical community has embraced Fauci, and that the line is that this is the perfect guy for the position. Trump is trusting Fauci, but you are the anti-Fauci. You're basically saying that virtually everything that Fauci is saying is wrong. So I guess I'd like to kind of start there. First of all, do you have any relationship with Fauci? Do you know each other on a personal level?
No, never met the guy. Never met him. Never met him.
And what would he say about your credentials? Would he acknowledge that, yes, someone in Dr. Shiva's position
the issue is, why are we... Let's talk about his credentials. What are Fauci's credentials?
Tell us.
He couldn't even get into MIT. He had to go to Cornell. Cornell's a nice school. He couldn't get into MIT. I'm sorry. Okay, I have 4 degrees from MIT. So
okay, why is Fauci in the position that he's in?
Because that's it. Now you're talking a good question. Why is the mainstream media have so much influence? Why is Fauci where he is? Now we're talking to a good question. Let's talk about that. And why is no one questions this guy? How long has this guy been here, Jim? He's been there since Reagan.
Including Trump, by the way. So it's everybody, including Trump, is trusting this guy right now.
Yeah, and that's okay. Look, there was a time when 97% of the people thought that the sun went around the earth, right? That did take place, right? And one guy had all the data which said that's not true. Well, the fact is the sun doesn't go around the earth goes around the sun. There are facts. The fact is that the immune system, we're all a bunch of walking bucket of germs, 380 trillion viruses inside of us, as I keep saying, 60 trillion bacteria. We're a germ factory. Microbes are our friends. To think that, let me just turn this off. To think that germs and viruses and microbes are not part of our ecosystem is basically a fake, a fear-mongering scientific understanding of everything we know about science. The microbes, everything we're talking about, is a part of who we are, and they will always be a part of who we are. We're never going to eliminate viruses. We're not going to eliminate any of these viruses. They're going to be here for a long time, so I hope that's clear. So the first thing we need to step back is realize that we've been imbued with Hollywood, with movies like Pandemic, all these movies, that viruses are some boogie monster. It's like sort of the last boogie monster left, okay? And that these viruses somehow come and they attack our bodies and they eat away our eyeballs, or they eat away our liver, or they eat away our heart, right? Remember when Ebola was coming out? What was the news? Oh my God, the guy's bleeding inside and out. You almost thought that this virus was getting in and eating away your body, right? I'm sure that's what 99% of the numbskulls on mainstream media thought, because these people, again, don't know science. They're basically taught in the mainstream media to write something, their editors scratch it out, and they're taught to be good little lapdogs, and then their publishers own it. But the bottom line is, that's not what it is. The truth is, the scientific truth is, that it's an overreactive immune system, a dysfunctional and weakened immune system that overreacts and attacks parts of your own body in response to exogenous pathogens coming in, which are occurring at every moment in time. In every millisecond, we're being, right? So in the normal case, the immune system gets it, and you don't even think about it. You have proper nutrients, you maybe get a little sniffle. Sometimes, you scratch your eyes, right? These are all little immune processes taking place. In the advanced dysfunctional state, your immune system attacks and eats itself, starts eating itself, and this is a very complex system. And I'm one of the leaders in this. This is why the National Science Foundation had me come and do the prestige lecture on it. So people want to know about the immune system. Let's invite Mr. Fauci and let's have me. And let all the world, let him bring all of his scientists. Let him bring every scientist on the NIH, and I'll take them all on to talk about what's going on. That's how confident I am in my expertise. Just like if you were a senior level mechanic who knew something, and you had a bunch of little children running around, you would say, yeah, bring it on, okay? Because I know what I'm talking about. This would be like telling a master, who's a karate master, that you don't know what you're talking about. And that's what we have. We have little scoundrel mainstream media running around who don't know science, who frankly can't even solve a math problem, most of them, telling a guy of my level of credentials who's busted his butt to get here that they try to brand me as something. So,
what confuses me is it's not just about Fauci and U.S. media. This is around the globe. Every country around the globe seems to have reacted in the same way to this, which is with this essential total shutdown.
Right.
So Chivas anywhere that are being listened to?
Yeah, there are. If you look at how many people have signed up our petition, and I hope you've looked at it, nearly 70,000 people have, nearly 3,000 medical doctors, scientists all over the world. It's a lot of people.
But none of these governments are listening.
Well, what you have to understand is, who is the government these days? Who runs these governments? We have seen a consolidation of power as never before. Technology helps. Look, when the printing press came, you remember when the printing press, people talking about the Gutenberg printing press? This is quite an interesting thing to understand the history of technology. A guy like David Noble talks about this. When the printing press came, many people thought, oh my God, the printing press is here. We'll all be able to print, right? All of us will be the press, right? We'll all have the ability to have more freedom of discourse and discussion, etc. That was a notion of when a new technology like the printing press came. What actually happened over time, what should have been a technology for freedom, got consolidated to 4 major publishing houses, right? 4 major publishing houses owned all the newspapers, they owned the book publishing companies. So if you're a young writer, you have to get an agent, you need a Harvey Weinstein, okay? You have to kiss up to him, and then you get to be a star. So we consolidated power. Well, when the internet came, I wrote an interesting book, I don't have it here, called Arts and the Internet, the Guide to the Revolution. I was like, wow, I do a lot of artwork. A lot of my friends are artists. And I said, wow, the internet will eliminate gatekeepers. We can all go direct. We were all building our own little web pages. Well, what actually happened? Well, you had five major people control the internet right now. You have the Zuckerbergs, you have the Googles, and you have the three major telco companies. So whenever technology comes, we think there's going to be freedom, but as long as there's this global elite, they consolidate power. So as time has gone on, it's easier to consolidate power, Jim. It's easier. Before you had many little kingdoms, right? People can travel around, right? But now we can travel around at the speed of light through the internet, through all sorts of vehicles. So the elite have also become more and more consolidated. And the people no longer are nationalist people. Warren Buffett doesn't give a damn about the United States. He invests everywhere. The Clintons and the Gates don't give a damn about you, the American worker. They invest everywhere. They'll invest anywhere. So you've seen the consolidation of power at a enormous, particularly in the last 20 years. You can go look at the number of billionaires and probably trillionaires that have been generated. You have enormous consolidation of power. So you should not be that surprised. In fact, I find it that you're surprised that it's quite interesting that what we're seeing here, this was well planned, well executed consolidation of power. And look, the guy that's behind this, it's interesting, is Bill Gates, who, by the way, didn't write DOS, didn't invent DOS, bought it from someone else and flipped it, but he does understand software to the extent, whenever I create software, you go through three phases of release. Alpha phase, where you do an initial test. Beta phase, you get more people to use it, and then gold, where you release it. So you go through testing. You see how people react. Do they like your product or not? Well, the event 2001, 201, whatever that, you could argue that was like an alpha release, right? Testing with people's psychology. Is this a beta release or a gold release? I don't know, but I can tell you the dynamics of this is a global opportunity to enforce, as I put in my first tweet, and that tweet will probably end up as a very, very important historic tweet, because it said that as a MIT PhD in biological engineering, what we're witnessing right now is one of the biggest fear-mongering hoaxes that will destroy economies, to manipulate economies, to suppress dissent, and to impose mandated medicine. That's what this is about. Now, the mainstream media they know exactly what I'm talking about, because they're part of it. They're part of that collusion, as though vaccines have no safety issues. Well, they do. In fact, there's no safety standards done on vaccines, because they're a biologic. They don't even have to go through pharmaceutical testing. Now, most of the fools in mainstream media don't even know this, because they don't even know the regulatory framework of the FDA. So you have ignorance, and you have people being taken advantage of, and that's what you have. But it comes down to a fundamental ignorance of science, and that's what Fauci's banking on. Trump was able to make it through the Russian collusion, okay? Because he could do his thing. He could do his thing with impeachment. But this thing, he's surrounded by people where he doesn't have the tool chest, right? He doesn't have the chops. He has some gut instincts on this, okay? He knows something doesn't smell right. But this isn't a different playing field. And that's why, a guy like me, that's why all these things are going so viral. This is why you called me. This is why I'm getting 5,000, 6,000 messages. This is why I'm getting almost 400 interview requests, because people want answers and they know that things are not adding up.
Well, let's be very clear, please, about what you're asserting regarding this virus. Are you suggesting that this was made up, that this was created in order to create an excuse for the deep state to take over?
Well, what I'm arguing is, and it's not even an argument, let's just look at the facts. Let's just do a simple data analysis. Let's apply some math, which people have forgotten in this country because of this whole thing that everything is a right answer. Let's just apply some simple math. When H1N1 took place, how many million people got it? About 62 million people, if I don't know, right? 17% of the US population. How many people died from it? About 60,000 people, am I right? Okay. Was there a shutdown called?
That's worldwide, right?
No, in the United States.
U.S.?
Yeah, much more worldwide. How many people in the United States? How many people in the United States? How many shutdowns were called here? Did we call a global pandemic? Did we shut down the United States economy? Did we?
Not at all, that I can recall.
So you can just put those numbers here and just look at them as a scientist. Okay, this event took place. It was an infectious disease. It was something that was spreading. It was something that was lethal. So many people died. Now look over here. We have something that has a higher infectivity rate. We don't have anywhere near the number of deaths. And more importantly, right now we're seeing a decline in so-called the flu, the pneumonia, a linear decline, and an increase in so-called COVID infected and people dying. Okay? It's almost like one is cannibalizing the other. Again, everyone should go look at the data. The problem is, in this case, we can't even trust the data because they're using polymerase chain reaction experiments, which they're looking for a little piece of a nucleotide. It's like they call them virus hunters. They call them bacterial hunters. They're like trying to find something to pin the crime on somebody. And this has been the history of the scientific, biological, medical establishment for far too long. They've been trying to always pin some disease, including cancer, on retroviruses. Every disease is a virus. AIDS is a virus. Why? Because when you pin it on a virus, you create enough fear. You know, you ever heard of how IBM used to sell? Do you know the IBM selling model, Jim?
No.
Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. FUD. So when IBM went to a customer, they'd say, well, look, we're Big Blue. Are you going to buy from that small guy over there? What about when your computer fails? We're going to be here for you. Is he ever going to be in business? Uncertainty. Can you trust him? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's a selling methodology. Pharma uses FUD. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. In fact, it's taught in business school. All right? So what you're seeing here, and this is not something that's even conspiracy. This is, and if you're frankly stupid if you don't understand this, fear, uncertainty, and doubt is a selling methodology. And pharma is the masters of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Masters of it. Watch every commercial prime time. They follow that formula. And finally, they reach to a beautiful utopia where you've taken this drug and it's healed you. So that is a foundational model of this. So when you look at this virus, you tell me what is fundamentally different about this virus and H1N1 in terms of the catastrophic numbers. And the answer is, this is actually not as worse. Okay? And then, so then, the other thing is, well, this could be a bioweapon, right? This could be a bioweapon. Well, okay. So what are we supposed to do? Get even more scared now? You see, that's almost to add gravitas to a virus. When let me tell you that the fundamental issues, our immune system has been around for billions of years. Billions. Just think about that. And that immune system, the evolution it's gone through, has been to create what's called a resilient system. If you again study engineering systems, which biologists don't, you will find one of the core features of systems is resilience. You build a bridge. A bad bridge will fall apart if a wind comes. A good bridge can take a wave, right? It can handle it. Skyscrapers, they don't build them stiff anymore. They build them to take a little, that's called resilience. They can take a hit and get stronger. So our bodies are built to have resilience. Now the people who weaken their bodies, and we can go through the reasons, they have non-resilient systems and they'll crack. And by the way, all these people that are dying, well, frankly, many of them were going to die anyway, the way they were living. So let's talk about that. But we don't want to talk about that. We want to assume as though, wow, this virus is killing everyone. No, it isn't. It's killing the people that are elderly as they age. Their immune system is weakened. It's killing those who were smokers. It's killing those people who had very compromised immune systems. And on top of it, idiots like Fauci, the model of social distancing all day long, creates social isolation. We just have a wonderful family friend, okay? My friend calls me, he goes, Shiva, my wife has relapsed after 40 years. 40 years she's relapsed into serious depression. 40 years ago she was on Prozac. He goes, I got to put my wife back on it. I go, what's going on? He goes, she can't go out and swim anymore. She's such an extrovert. She can't play mahjong with her friends. Social isolation, the detriment of social isolation, destroys the immune system. It creates viral infection. So let's step back, including all of you guys that want to talk. Let's have a real conversation. And let's elevate this conversation beyond the fraudulent, fake science conversation that the mainstream media wants to have. Let's talk about the immune system. Let's talk about real science. Let's start educating people about science, because for far too... Do you know in China, you know who's on billboards in China? Scientists, engineers. We put stupid people on billboards like George Clooney and Lady Gaga and idiots.
So just to be clear, so that the audience knows, because again, you've been blowing up in some conspiracy websites and so on, you're not saying the virus is not real, and you're saying that, yeah, most likely it came out of Wuhan. And
no, I'm not even saying that. I'm not. No, so don't. No, I'm not saying that, Jim. I'm saying, yeah, there's a virus. Okay, there's a virus.
And just to be clear, where do you think it came from? I just want to kind of establish what.
Well, one research says that it came out of Wuhan. There's other people out there who are saying the first 13 out of the 41 don't match. I've heard people say it came out of Fort Detrick. All of that's irrelevant. This is all. This is all.
It's how do we respond to it? I understand that.
No. This is all nonsense. This is all playing on people's psychology.
But let me just stress the biggest hotspot that most people are aware of. China, who knows really what happened in China, because you can't trust anything that China says. But Italy had what appears to have been a serious crisis, and it's appeared to be worse than anything we'd seen before.
How many people died? Before you go there, you're making up assertions that are not true. I'm sorry I just want to level. How many people died of flu over the last 2